Hello my friends, I'm Max Eberle and welcome to this instructional DVD on the fundamentals of pool. And we all know how important fundamentals are for any athlete in any sport. Take a look at Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods and everybody knows how much they focused on their fundamentals, at least if you really follow their careers. And it turns out like that in pretty much every sport. The top players of the sport also have great fundamentals, and that's what I want to help you with, so you can become as good as you want to be at the sport of pool. And if you didn't realize pool was a sport, you're definitely going to find that out through the course of this DVD. And I've been fortunate enough to have many great teachers in my career and to really focus on my fundamentals, and it's helped me out tremendously. And now I'm happy to have the opportunity to share a lot of these principles that I've learned about fundamentals with you. So let's get started. Okay, so you're probably wondering, why do I have all this sporting equipment out here on the table? And the reason is to show you the similarities that pool has with every other sport. And basically, every sport with a ball requires a throwing motion. And pool is no different. So what we're going to do is go outside. I'm going to demonstrate some of the other throwing motions in other sports, and then we'll come back in and talk about how you can integrate a throwing motion into your pool game, which you're going to need to do to play pool effectively. Okay, so here we are in northern Idaho. It's October 1st. It's a chilly fall day. We're going to talk about the throwing motions in other sports. So here we have football. Baseball. Alright, notice how even though we're using a racket, we're not actually going to throw anything. We're still giving it a throwing motion. Very similar to the baseball, the football. Here's the softball. Wind up, follow through. Alright, now golf is very similar to pool. Alright, see how in all the sports you have a backswing, you hit the ball and you follow through. Alright, and the thing is, there's no interference with your body. Basically, your arms are free to complete the entire motion from beginning to end. From here back to here. Alright, so you have a wind up and then follow through, releasing the ball up here. See that again. There we go. Volleyball, very similar. Hit the trampoline. But bowling's the same way, right? There's a backswing and follow through. Even hacky sack, you know, you're using your legs, but right? Pretty good sport. And one thing I wanted to show you, we'll use this hacky sack as our golf ball. Now the idea of not interfering with your stroke is really important. And notice how free the arms are to do what they're supposed to do in the throwing motion. Automatically, golf, you're balanced, you come up to the ball, set up, and follow through. What you don't do is you wouldn't come up here right on top of the ball and then put your legs or your body in the way, right? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. You're not going to get a free throwing motion, a free swing. Same thing in tennis, right? You're not going to, it's say the tennis ball is coming your way, you're not going to put the body in the way and then hit your body, right? You're just not going to get a very good tennis swing. So the body is always out of the way in whatever sport you're playing in order to get the best throwing motion. Alright, let's go in to the pool table, check it out. Okay, so we are back at the pool table, and that was a lot of fun. And now how does that relate to pool, all those different sports that we were playing outside? And how does it relate to this section on stance? Because that's what this video is, basically 7 primary skills in pool. And we're focusing on stance, so why all this talk about stroke and throwing motion? And the reason is because we want to create a stance that allows our stroke to be free from the body, just as the throwing motion in other sports are free from the body. So remember, we had all the throwing sports: baseball, football, we had tennis, golf, right? So pool, we're going to have a stroke. It's going to look something like this. The backswing and a follow through, right? So our setup, our stance, is vitally important, and what we don't want is our body to interfere with our stroke. And that is one of the main problems I see in a lot of my students, especially beginners and intermediate players. And the problem is, if you don't overcome that as a player, then you're not going to really be able to advance to higher levels. So that's why we're here, is to talk about these stance and how that will allow us to have the throwing motion that we want to play pool effectively. Okay, so what is it going to look like, the throwing motion? Okay, what we want is a backswing and a follow through with no body in the way. So what does it look like if your body's in the way? It would tend to be a crowding of the cue stick. Say something like this, right in here where the hand is in here. So it's very easy for your hand to hit your body and to stop your stroke. And what happens, I see in a lot of players, is that when they're coming through, their stroke ends up turning. So from right here, now can you see how a follow through, if your body's in the way, it could cause your hand to turn out that way just to avoid your body in here. I see that a lot. That's one of a pretty common mistake. And this really has to do with alignment and the stance. Okay, so what we want to do is set up our feet, our body, and our arm. Align it in just a way so that we have a free stroke. And here, let's see, we'll start out. This is basically what I'm talking about, where there's no interference. It's basically a throwing motion. I'm exaggerating my follow through right now. Right, but you see how my body is not interfering with the stroke, as opposed to having the body right on top of the cue. It's just too close in here. And you'll find that the only way to avoid hitting your body is by dropping your elbow down here and following through. And we want to do that on purpose, not because our body is forcing us to do that. So let's talk about setup, and we're going to start with the feet and how you can set your feet up and then position your body to have the freest stroke possible. Okay, so here we are. I have a shot set up for you, cue ball into the 8 ball. And if you see this line on the table here, I have that exact same line down on the ground, but it's actually in a vertical plane. So if you imagine a piece of glass here, a vertical window right here, then both of these lines would be parallel to each other inside of this vertical glass plane. So what this does, shows me where to put my right foot. And that's the beginning of your pool stance. You want to find the spot for your right foot, the correct distance from the cue ball. And that's going to be based on how tall you are, how long your arms are, the shape of your stance. But basically it's going to be close to what you're doing right now as far as the distance from the cue ball. And I'll show you a way in a little bit how to set it up the same every time. So I like to put the ball of my right foot on that line right around the ball of my foot. And then the left foot comes out here. Right? So, right around the ball of my left foot. Now there could be some variation in here. The left foot could be out here. Could be up in here a little bit more. Even snooker players, they have it way back here. They're more like this. Oh, this is a nice pool stance though, right here. And you'll notice that the left foot is not also on the stroking line. Okay, so this is what we'll call an open stance because our left foot is open from the stroking line. Okay, now this is important right here. We have the stroking line here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm naturally facing in this direction. So I'm basically going to bring my body down in this direction as I go into my stance right here. Put my left hand out there. I think it's more right around in here. There we go. Okay, so you can see coming down that way, I'm staying balanced. And you notice what that allows me to do is I pull my body naturally, it'll just get out of the way of the cue stick. So basically what you're not doing is twisting around like this, coming into the shot like that. What that'll tend to do, watch what happens to my body. As I do this, the cue comes really close to my body, and then my shoulder over here is going to cross over the cue, bringing my body closer to the cue like that. And so now I have a situation where I'm not freed up from my body as we were talking about before. But if I keep my body away from the shot in this direction, my body naturally pulls away, my waist pulls this way, and now I have all this space over here. Notice the distance from my hand to my hip over here. I have a lot of distance. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it a stroke right down the stroking line. See that? Okay, so that's the basics of foot positioning. Okay, now I'm going to recommend to put the center of your foot right around the ball of your foot on the stroking line. That's what I like to do as far as your position of the foot on the stroking line. And there is room for play here. What you could do is have your toes right here on the stroking line. You could even be over here on this side of the stroking line, and what that will do is give you even more space between your hand and your body, provided that you do bend down this way. What you want to try to do though is avoid coming too far over the stroking line like this, because that's going to pull your body close to the stroking line, and it's going to bring your shoulder over here. So now you're going to be forced to have your hand under here. And I used to do this earlier in my pool playing career, and I got to playing really well like this, and I knew there was a better way to do it. At least there were higher levels, and I wanted to have that alignment with my arm straight up and down, because that forced me to have my forearm angled in like this, and I was close to my body, and again it was forcing me to drop my elbow, which is something that's actually really good. We're going to go over that in the stroke section, but we want to do that because we want to, not because we're forced to, because our body's being in the way. Alright, so go ahead and stick with that. Keep your foot about the ball of your foot on the line. I would definitely recommend that. And as far as the distance between your feet, I'm going to recommend slightly more than shoulder width apart. So right about in here, again, you have some play for that. Remember, there's no set rules for anything. I'd like to give some guidelines. You can work with some of these. I'm going to show you what works best for me. I'll show you how that looks. Slightly more than shoulder width right there. Of course, you could have your feet together right here. Now the main thing is that you're balanced, right? You could have a super wide stance like that. There's a lot of players who have done this. Okay, it's pretty far right there. But think of a golf swing or a golf stance, which is slightly more than shoulder width, and there we're talking about balance. As far as your feet, the angle of your feet to the stroking line, you could have it anywhere from 90 degrees to each other. So notice right here, my feet are 90 degrees. It's like a T right here. That's what you could do. I'm going to recommend not to go beyond that as far as pointing your foot, your back foot back that way. And this foot out here, I'd say don't do that. I like to keep mine actually less than 90 degrees. So right about in there. That's what I like. Right, you could have your feet parallel or even inside of parallel like that. But for me, the most comfortable line of my feet is right about like that. I'd say give that a shot. Now let's talk about golf. We'll compare the stance to golf. I have a club right here. Alright, so here we are. We have a golf shot. Alright, now see how I'm balanced right here? It's a very natural stance. I'm going to try to relate the golf stance to the pool stance. Now what happens if we just replace this with a pool cue? Come over here, we stay in our stance, but now just turn the cue on the stroking line that we have set up right here. And I'm not really moving my body in that direction. I just kept my body right here, but I just turned my hands that way and I'm turning my head that way. And I come down this way. And my shoulder is already in a great position right here over the stroking line. Now I just get my elbow lined up there also. So you see how you want to be balanced like that? And I talk about it also in terms of playing football. Say you're blocking somebody coming after you and you're going to just block them like that, right? So you're balanced. And that leads to another thing, is not to go chasing the cue ball with your hand in order to find your balance. So in other words, you don't need to come way up here like this and put all your balance over here, put all your weight on your front foot. You don't need to go out there to find your hand out here. In other words, if you just stay balanced right here, as you bring your chest down, you pull your hips back and bring your chest down, your hand is automatically going to go out there and you're going to be in a nice stance like that. So just remember that. Keep your balance. Your hand is automatically going to go out, and as your hips go back, your eyes are going to descend on that stroking line, and your arm is in a great position to be aligned properly. And we're going to go look at that from this angle, from right up there. Okay, before we head over there and look at the stance from that side, I came up with another way to think about approaching your stance besides the golf analogy. Is imagine you have something on the ground in front of you. Here we have the hacky sack, and all I'm going to do is reach down and pick it up, keeping my back straight and not bending my knees too much. So how that's going to look is about like this, right? Now you just keep your balance automatically without thinking about it. So I want you to give this a try. And what happens is your hips are actually going to move backwards as you do that without even thinking about it. So I'm going to bend at my hips, and I'm going to bend my neck and not bend my back so much. I want to keep that straight. So it's like this. And now look, while I'm down here, if I were to just look over that way with my eyes, turn my head that way, I'm looking right down that stroking line. Put my hand out there, well, my bridge is in the perfect spot, and my shoulder is right over the stroking line also. So I'm actually in a good stance right here. All I have to do is line my elbow up over this stroking line. So that would look like this. So there it is, very natural. And what it is you're not falling over. So if you just try to come over like this without moving your hips back, you're going to fall over like that. You're going to lose your balance. So from the side, it will look something like this. See that? And then you turn your head, now you're in the stance. Now remember, if you keep your hips right here, try to lean over, all your weight's going to go forward, and you're going to fall forward. So this is something we all do naturally. We just stay balanced like this. Notice I'm not bending my knees too much. You can actually, if you want, you can crouch a little bit more as part of your stance. And that's up to you what feels more comfortable. To have more of a crouch stance or keep your legs straighter with a slight bend. And also you'll see some variation in players. What they do, what they like is more comfortable. You'll see some players will have their front leg bent like that and their back leg straight, something like that. Or they'll be more even, a little bit like that. The thing to keep in mind here is if you do bend your front leg more, keep your balance. Don't go chasing your weight all up like this, bringing your weight up here, because that's not what's really going on when you see a player like that. They're actually still balanced. The front leg is bent, but their balance is back here, like that. So whatever you do, maintain your balance, and it's going to benefit you greatly in the long run. Okay, now from this angle, what I'm going to do is bend down, pretend I'm picking something up like that, and notice where I am when I pick that up. Here we are. Turn my head that way, put my hand out there. My shoulder's already right here over the stroking line. Look that way, put my hand out, and now my elbow line up over here. And you can see what's on the stroking line. My bridge hand, my grip hand, my elbow, my shoulder, and my foot. And my body's over here. My left foot as well. Alright, now we'll check it out on the table. Alright, so here we are with the table and the stroking line. Just to show you what it looks like. Okay, notice how my body is over here on this side of the stroking line of my hand, my elbow, my shoulder. All here on the stroking line. My foot is underneath here. And also, if I just stand here like this, my eye is over here on this side of the stroking line, so I'm not looking down the stroking line. So in order to get there, all I'm going to do is that move where I'm on the way bending down, but I just go to here to where I'm on this vertical plane, but I'm way up here, so I can look right down the stroking line, have my body out of the way, have my arm be lined up in the stroking line, and I can put my arm out here. Now I'm looking at the stroking line the entire time that I'm coming down into the shot. And it makes it much easier to be on line when you do that. And the power of doing it this way, notice how I'm down here. Now watch this. I could actually shoot left-handed here. I'm keeping my same body alignment. And we talked so much about balance last time. See that? Now I just put that out here, have the alignment over here. Now I'm over my left foot with my stroking arm. So that's what you're looking for. Now in terms of your arm, just a little bit on body mechanics, your shoulder is a ball joint, so it can go any direction. Your elbow is a hinge joint, it only goes one direction. So if I do this, that's actually my elbow joint, the ball joint, and my shoulder joint going that way. But the elbow only goes in one direction. So this is very valuable for our stroke and for our setup, because when we're down here like this, if we have our shoulder on the stroking line, the elbow on the stroking line, now that, of course, the hand is there too. There's only one direction for the cue to go, and that is straight. So it just goes straight by virtue of your body mechanics, and that's the beauty of setting up your stance like this. So if I do more of a stand-up stance, you can see my forearm right here. And then when I come down, you can see how my elbow is lined up on the stroking line also. And you've probably seen players who have a sidearm stroke like this, where their elbow is way over here, but of course their hand is still on the stroking line. And one thing that enables them to do is keep their hand away from their body, even though their elbow is over here. Some players develop that because when they're kids, they can barely reach over the table, and they can't get their elbow way up here, so they're shooting like this. So they remain like this as they develop, and they've developed their coordination and their stroke to be able to do that. So the beauty of having your elbow there is it's in line with the natural mechanics of your elbow joint and your shoulder joint. So what does it look like, the throwing motion in pool? We talked about all the other sports and the motion that you do. So when you don't have a cue, this is the simplified throwing motion that your hand goes through. Notice, okay, you're not hitting your body. If you hold your arm out about like this at this angle, see how you have that free range of motion right in here? Right, so watch this. I'm going to keep my arm right here, and now I'm going to just bend at my hips. I'm not going to change anything. Come down here. You see that? Naturally it wants to be there. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how to get your eye on the stroking line, or more clearly your dominant eye, because that's what's going to be on the stroking line. Everybody's different in terms of where your center of vision is, and we all have different dominant eyes. I'm more on my left eye right here, and if you're right eye dominant, you're not going to have to come over this far to look down the stroking line. Obviously you'd be more over here. So theoretically you could actually turn your body a little bit more. It would be easier for you to do that and keep your body away from the cue, because your eye's right over that line. So your arm and your right eye over here. But to have your left eye over there, then you're going to bring your head over a little bit further, like that. So figure out what your dominant eye is, and that's what you want to get on the stroking line, or wherever your center of vision is. It might be just right in the middle of your nose, and that's what you want to have on the stroking line, even at the standing position. And it really runs together. The stroking line is what ties in your stance, your stroke, and your aim. They're all interrelated, so you really need to be able to find the stroking line in order to set your foot up. That's the first thing that you need to find in order to find where you're going to put your right foot. So let's talk about that. Alright, so what happens if we set up too close to the cue ball in our stance? let's see, here I am. Notice I'm putting all my weight on my back foot over here, and I'm definitely off balance. And we don't want that. Okay, so what happens if we set up too far? Aha, my weight is forward now, up on my left leg. We don't want that either. So in striving for balance, what we want is to be the proper distance from the cue ball. And if we can do that, then we're going to be balanced every time. So that's how important it is to be aware of your distance between yourself and the cue ball. It's really important. And you can actually set up for this just by being aware of that. You don't actually need a system. Just by keeping your eye on the cue ball, you'll just know where to set up. So the more you play, it'll just come natural to you. I find a lot of beginners and people trying to get to the next level find their sticking point, or one of the things they have a challenge with is getting the right distance from the cue ball. Or when I'm just showing somebody this stance, anytime you make a change in your alignment and stuff, it can distract you from being the right distance from the cue ball. So I'm going to give you a couple different ways how to do that. And one of them will be basically just put the Q-tip right here, right by the edge of the cue ball. Okay, first actually get down in your stance. Okay, where you're nice and comfortable, find a good stance. And now put your tip there. Stand up and check out where your back foot is in relation to the cue. And here I am, I'm right by the back of the cue stick. So now I know that all I have to do to develop the right balance in my stance, I can walk into the shot, place my tip right here exactly. If you're off an inch, then you're going to be off balance, so you don't want to be having any variation in how you do that. So make sure you put that in the precise location. And now make sure it's on the stroking line, and drop your back foot in where you found to be comfortable. And there you go. Now everything you do, just get into your stance like normal. Everything is going to fall into place perfectly just because of your back foot. So you know your distance here. You know that when you bend over this way, your hand is going to come out right where it needs to be. Right? So that's real powerful. And when you're doing this right here, and you're trying to place your back foot, be careful not to do one of these things because now that's going to take your foot off of the stroking line. So as you do this, keep that cue right here on this line. You can even stand up right close to the cue so your eyes are above and you can look down, place your foot. Okay, now you're fine. You can pretty much get in there in your sleep, in your stance. Another way to do it would be to actually get behind your cue. Alright, get behind the cue, balance on your left foot, put your right foot out here, and then come in like that. Okay, let me do it where there's a little bit more room. Okay, here we go. On the stroking line, I'm standing here actually, my feet, the stroking line is right here now. Okay, so I'm going to stand right on the stroking line, look down it. I'm going to get way behind my cue over here. Now I'm going to balance on my left foot in this case. I'm going to put my right foot where I know it should be under the back of the cue. And I can see that it's on the stroking line because my eyes are on the stroking line. And now, there it is. My right foot is in place. All I got to do is step forward with my left foot. And now I'm ready just to come down into my stance. There we go. Alright, now let's address where to grip the cue back here in your grip hand. And the answer is that there is no answer. That it depends on you, it depends on your height, how broad your shoulders are, how long your arms are, how long your bridge is, in other words from your hand right here to the cue ball. So that all is going to affect where you grip the cue. And what I don't really like is a rule of thumb where you use the balance point. and then say, 8 inches beyond the balance point, back behind the balance point. There is no one size fits all. So a general guideline to use is that at the moment the Q-tip is at the cue ball, you want your back arm straight up and down. So right here at this moment, your back arm could be straight up and down. And I find that for me it actually changes a little bit depending on, a lot of times when I have a long shot, I'll hold it further back here. A little bit shorter shot like this, I'll come up right up in here. But what you don't want is you don't want to be extreme way up in here, because now you have no follow through. This is mainly a beginner problem, but it's a good thing to address, and the longer you play, you're going to find where to hold it. But I don't want figuring out where to grip the cue to limit you. So what you're going to do is set up in your stance, put the tip by the cue ball, and then hold it so you're straight up and down over here. Now if I change the angle of my body also, look how that brings my right shoulder over here. So I would actually be holding it like that if I had a stance like that. So as you have a more open stance to the cue with your shoulders, as your shoulders open up here, now it gives your wingspan a little bit more length, and you're going to naturally hold it back here. So work with that. The basic idea is that you have a pendulum motion. So you have your back swing back here, you're coming through, you're hitting the cue ball, and now you have room to follow through. Alright. Okay, as far as your stance, I just want to encourage you to work hard at this, because usually it feels pretty weird when you implement something new in your alignment. And even if you change your stroking arm, the angle, whether you're coming from here to here, or from out here into here, you're still going to have all the touch that you were born with and that you've developed. And it really is not going to take too long till it actually starts working for you. You might actually feel the benefit right away, and that's what I notice in a lot of my students, is that they can feel how powerful it is once they get it, even in the first 5 minutes. Although it might not take 5 minutes to get used to it. When I made this change in my stance, it actually took like 3 months till I really had it mastered, and that's working hard at it every day. And all my practice was really focused on my stance and setting it up, working on my stroke. But I had been playing for over 10 years before that point. But you can do it, is all I want to say. Stick with it, work on all of these points one at a time, and then start putting them together, and you'll really feel happy as you start making balls really easily, and you can feel the power of this alignment. You just got to try it for yourself and stick with it. Okay, the other thing is that you might already have a really effective stance and stroke, and you might just need to change one or two things. Maybe you know that you want to make a change. And you might find that one idea that I've given you has helped you out and has been all that you need. So keep in mind, I'm not trying to make it to where everybody's cookie cutter has a cookie cutter stance right here. You can definitely implement this strategy though exactly like I say, and it will turn out great for you. Or if it just never feels comfortable 100%, just by doing this you'll have increased body awareness and awareness of what's going on in your stance, and it could help you out, even just one idea here. So there you go, work hard, and we'll see you in the next section. Okay, in talking about the stance, I've mentioned the importance of placing your feet, and how placing your feet in a certain way can help set up your upper body with good alignment that we've gone over. And that's true, your feet will play an important part in setting up your upper body. I do want to point out though that you can do whatever you want with your feet if you know what you're doing with your upper body. As long as you're balanced, there's a lot of things you can do. So for instance, here's my stance. I could potentially do this without changing my upper body that much. I could do this. I could get on one foot back here, and my upper body stance is just the same as when I was down here in my perfect foot position. So you really want to work on your upper body stance. Two parts of your stance, your lower body and your upper body. You got to get your alignment for your upper body worked out. And the alignment that we've gone over with having your arms straight up and down is excellent, and lining it up with your shoulder. If you can't bring yourself to do that, and you have to have your arm close to your body, either with your arm angled in or just your elbow close. If you have to do that, then you're going to have to put a lot of work into making sure that you develop your stroke and learn how to avoid your body by dropping your elbow. So it is possible if you insist on sticking with that method, because, you know, as before I said, a lot of problems can be caused by having either too short of a stroke or going offline. So you have to be aware of that, develop your stroke the best you can, or go ahead and change your whole upper body alignment so it all works together and you have no problems. And the time spent doing that will be well worth it, and you can do it. Alright, now knowing that you can do a bunch of different things with your feet and still keep your upper body alignment the same has very practical applications, especially when having a shot where the table's in your way. And it's going to come up all the time, so you have to be able to deal with it. You have to know your stroking line and get your body over to avoid the stroking line. And then balance on the table somehow. So I'm going to be up on my right toe here. I'm going to put my weight here. This is going to become my stance, part of my stance, the table. And I'm going to set it up so my upper body alignment is basically the same as it always is with that follow through. So you see how I can transfer that upper body stance back to my normal stance. So you're going to have to learn a bunch of different ways to do this, because there's just a bunch of different situations. Here I'm going to put my leg, my left leg, up on the table here, and then turn my upper body as much as I can. I might not be able to perfectly get your upper body alignment the way you want it every time, but try to get as close as you can. And maybe you're going to have to pull out the mechanical bridge or shoot left-handed. But you'll be surprised at just how many shots you can reach by stretching. And when you do that, you're going to want to hold the end of the cue. I see a lot of people, they'll try to hold the cue up here and stretch. Just makes sense to hold the back of the cue back here. And if the cue ball is further, now you can put your bridge might be underneath the joint over here in your hand back here. But I still have upper body alignment like that. You might have to use the bridge. It all depends on the situation. Okay, now we're going to talk about the bridge hand. This one right here. And it's got to be solid and functional, and it should enable you to do whatever you want to do and not stop you from doing it. And that's the big problem I find with a lot of beginners, is that their bridge is actually causing them problems, when they could really just do a couple of simple little things to make it better, to make it a lot more solid. So the idea is simplicity. And there's the open hand bridge right there. And the cool thing about the open hand bridge, it's very versatile. You can actually get backspin by hitting the cue ball low. You can do that, or you can come down with your back hand and get topspin just by moving your back hand. So you do have versatility even in one bridge configuration. I'm going to show you how to do that. This open hand bridge is really important, because if you can't make a closed hand bridge like that, then you're going to have to use the open hand bridge pretty much all the time, which is okay, and as long as you can do it properly. So start out like this, making a fist, and then put your thumb right here in between these knuckles, and then you open up the ends of your fingers like that. So you don't want to open it up all the way. Just make this like a tent shape right here. Okay, now we have the heel of your hand and your fingers, which are going to go onto the table down there. The idea to remember is that what you're doing is you're creating a V groove right here, and that's where the cue goes, right in that groove. What you want to be careful of is not to touch this part with your cue, because now you're going to have 3 different places where your cue is going to be with nothing to hold over it like that, like in the closed hand bridge. So right in there in the V groove, not right there. Okay, I also would say avoid doing one of these things where you're putting the cue here and here. Like that, you don't want to do that either. So stick with it like that, with your thumb up like that, or with your thumb down. Okay, let's check out a different view of this. Okay, so here's the bridge from another angle. Now you could have the back of your hand up like this, and what I'm going to recommend is to bring it over that way, because you're going to be more solid on the table with the whole back of your hand right here. Call this the heel of the hand. Okay, here would be, you're just on one side over here, and you're not as stable as you would be if you're down here. Okay, and see how the thumb is way up here? You don't want to bring it too far down there. You can if you really want it to be that low, but just stay right up here on the top part of your index finger. And if you want, you can put these 2 fingers by each other. There's a bunch of different variations for this. You could put 2 fingers under like that, 1 finger. So here we have this side. You want to keep your fingers nice and tight on the table. And that's one thing to remember with all of these bridges. You want it real tight on the table. Okay, so if you have too much pressure back here and not on the fingers, it's going to be kind of a wobbly bridge. And you want your thumb also to be tight. Don't do this to where you have a U shape. Here, keep your thumb real tight, and it's much better with a V shape. Okay, I'm going to show you another way to make it even more solid. So there's the open hand bridge. Now take the thumb and grab onto your index finger like that. And what that does is now it's going to pull down that index finger so this is even tighter onto the table, and your thumb is even going to be that much tighter. And now your cue is going to go parallel pretty much with that part of your thumb. Now first, when you first try this, it's going to feel funny because you're used to having your thumb up like that. But it's actually incredibly solid. You're probably going to like it really fast. Right? And there's a lot of adaptations that you can put this open hand bridge into, which you're going to need. So say you're trying to shoot over a ball like this. It's basically the open hand bridge up a little bit higher. You want to have the ability to bring that finger, your ring finger, under here when you're doing this. So on the open hand bridge, when you do the jack up shot like this over this ball, bring this finger under and your middle finger over to your index finger like that. And then you raise up like this. So these become one solid finger. You're actually raising up on your middle finger now, keeping it tight. Okay, and you want to be sure to be in that V groove as well, right here. So when you do this, don't lift up your wrist like that. That's a common mistake. You'll see people lift their wrist up and now they've lost any type of good V groove for this bridge. So keep your wrist down here, and that will help create the V groove. And you also at the same time want to avoid this right here, so you can keep it right in that groove like that. Okay, and now I have nice pressure. You can see how my finger's bending backwards. Even if you can't do that, you want to keep it nice and tight on your fingers. And in order to get a good hit on the cue ball, you want to get pretty close to it. As you come up, like from the side, it's going to look like that. So you're going to come up here. Now you can get a nice hit on the cue ball. Or if you want to get a little more of a stroke, you can pull back as far as possible. Like that. Okay, now in my book Zen Pool, I have a chapter in there called Bridge Language. And in there I talk about how you need to be fluent with your bridge hand and be able to form your different bridges quickly and easily and effectively. And basically not spending a lot of time trying to figure out what to do, which of course is normal any time that you start something new or you're just learning something. Definitely put the effort in to learn your bridges really as fast as you can when you're learning pool, because that's one of the biggest things that's going to help you advance really fast, is having a really good bridge and all the different bridges for all the different situations. So it's like sign language, where, you know, I mean, I can't speak sign language, but you don't see the people, you know, having a hard time figuring out how to form the letters and the words with their hand. They can just do it without thinking. So same thing when it comes to playing pool. If you know you're going to use an open hand bridge, you just make your open hand bridge, and you already have your bridge formed by the time you get down there. Before you get down there, you have it formed. So like here's a closed hand bridge, closed hand for follow, closed hand with the finger underneath, open hand bridge, open hand jack up, open hand or closed hand off the rail, open hand off the rail, another rail bridge. Say you're shooting off the rail back here. So you want to be able to form your bridges without having to use the cue. Like when you first start doing this, you're going to try to be figuring out, okay, how do I form my fingers? And you might actually need to put your cue here in order to figure out how to make your bridge. But you want to get to the point where you can make your bridge without the cue, without even thinking. So you do that by working on your bridge all the time throughout the day. Even when you're not playing pool, you can be working on your different bridge formations, and it's going to help a lot. So let's get back to some more bridges. Okay, so here's where your open hand bridge, your normal open hand bridge, you're going to adapt it. When you have a cue ball on the rail or near the rail, you just want to make that ball in the pocket, rolling the cue ball normally. Okay, so here would be the normal open hand bridge. If you do this, now what that forces you to do is pull way back up here on the back of the cue, and now you're shooting down on the ball. And we don't want to do that unless we decide to do that, because by shooting down on the ball, putting a little side spin is going to cause the cue ball to masse, curve off line, and it's not even going to hit your contact point. So we want to dictate the angle of the cue, so that's what we're going to build our bridge around. We want the cue to be almost level, not quite level. And then we're going to bring our hand up underneath that without popping it up. So we're just going to come right to where we're underneath the cue, touching it with our V groove right here. So I have it's on the thumb, and it's touching this part of the hand right here. And I even have it on my finger as well when I do the bridge like this. This is one form of the bridge, and then you just follow through like that. So you'll have different tables, different shapes over here. Most tables are going to be out a little bit further. So here we don't have as much room to work with as far as being able to use the rail. Okay, another one is if you want more room for a backswing, see how I can only pull it back to here? Now if I put my fingers like that, I can get a little bit more backswing. Say I wanted some more speed. Right, normally you're not going to have to blast it like that off the rail. Okay, so another one, you have this, it's an adapted closed hand bridge. You're really not going to use that one until you get out here off the rail, and that's when it's real common, right in here, which is a perfect bridge. In here again, we don't have a lot of room. If we were on a Brunswick or a diamond, we could actually put our hand down flat like that. The palm of our hand, the heel of our hand, we could put it right down here like that. We still can, but we have to wrap it around here in that case. Okay, so if we just want to roll this in again, we use that bridge or this bridge, but if we want to stop the cue ball or bring the cue ball back, and we're going to use an adapted open hand bridge, we're just going to elevate. So now we can strike the cue ball below center. This is about center ball from my angle right here, so I want to get below that, and the fingers have to be tight. So there we get backspin. But you see my pinky is real tight over here, and my index finger. Actually, I have all my fingers, and the pressure is very equal on all of them. So it's solid. I'm real solid in my thumb right here, and all of this connects to my arm up to my body, real solid as well. So that allows me to get a nice backswing. Further I am away from the cue ball with my hand, I can get more backswing. If I'm just up here like this, I can only pull back to here, and it's harder to generate the speed that I want. But when I come up here, now I have this much more backswing. Okay, here's an interesting variation of the open hand bridge. See how I have all this, the stack is in my way. I just want to make that 5 ball right here, and what I'm going to do is get up like this with my extended open hand bridge on my middle finger and my pinky finger. But I find I would like a little more height than that, so I'm going to get up on my ring finger. I find that right here, the ring finger gives me a little extra elevation. Now, it's not as solid. I can feel it's not quite as solid in this case, but if I just have to roll the cue ball in and I need that extra height, then I can hold it just solid enough. Or, you know, I feel like maybe that middle finger is fine, but I don't want to hit the 4 ball, so anyway. There we go, we got a shot on the 1 up in the corner. So you have to be creative with your bridge hand, and there's a lot of different variations you can do in order to be effective. So let's see, say I had even more balls in the way over here. Let's see if I can hit this cue ball from way back here. Okay, see that? Right, I could probably come back as far as this if I had to. Or I could come in here. You gotta be kind of like a spider in between balls sometimes. And of course you don't want to foul. Right? You have that shot. Let's see. Sometimes there's only place for like just to put one finger sometimes. So we have some more balls over here. Right, this is pretty extreme. But ideally you're going to have a place to have 2 fingers at least on the table. But just to give you an example. Okay, here's another example. I got to come in over here and drop in over these balls right here. I still don't want to foul on those, so in this case I'm going to make sure that the heel of my hand is up enough away from those balls. And notice how my stroking arm is free from my body. Think back to the section on stance, and I have basically the same alignment for my upper body, even though I'm sitting on the table and my right leg or right foot is on the ground. I'm stable, I'm balanced, I'm solid on the table. There's a bunch of different ways that this is going to come up, where you have to stretch and somehow manage to keep your upper body alignment, even though the table's in your way. So, but the thing you want to remember here is keep your upper body alignment the same, so you have that nice stroke and follow through. Okay, so let me show you the close hand bridge now. I'm going to start with the fist again, and I'm going to open up my index finger. Now I'm going to put my thumb right here on the side of the middle finger, and then I'm going to open up the middle finger like that. Now my thumb is on my middle finger way up in here, so you're not down in here. Put it way up in there, nice and tight on the middle finger. Now you can open up those fingers. Keep it tight right here. Now this one, you're going to do that. You have the option to curl your index finger like that and put it tightly on your thumb. It's actually really tight right in here. Or this, I find, is even tighter right here, and it's even more solid. So when we have a table, when we're on the table, how solid is it? Okay, so it's pretty solid, right? This one doesn't feel quite as solid. Still, it's pretty solid. Okay, there's a few different variations of what you can do with the closed hand bridge. Here I have the heel of my hand on the table, both sides. You could potentially turn it over a little bit so you're on that side, and you maintain weight on your pinky, your middle finger, and on this side. So you still have like a tripod with your hand. I prefer to be over on both sides of the heel of my hand, right here. So with the cue it looks like that. And you can get that down as low as you want to the table. Say you're doing a draw shot, you want to hit the ball real low and have a level stroke. In this case, although you don't have to be perfectly level. The idea of a level stroke, having a level stroke all the time, is kind of a myth. So let's put some chalk on it. So here's another variation where you lift your hand up off the table. Keep these fingers on the table. So you could do all three fingers, or you could put that one underneath and have your pinky and your middle finger on the table. Okay, the idea is that you want to have equal pressure on both sides, both fingers. That way you don't want to be over here, you're going to be imbalanced. So have equal pressure, and you can even put a lot of, not too much weight, but enough weight to make it nice and snug. You can see my fingers changing color. That's because I'm putting some weight in there, and my fingers are used to handling this. You want to really work with your bridge until you can handle some pressure like that. So either 3 fingers or 2, but that's for more of the follow shot. You want to hit the ball high, so you can have all fingers out like that. You can have this one under, have the palm, the entire hand down on the table. So that's what it looks like. So try it like this, where you have your finger up in the air and you have a good bridge with just your thumb there. Or you could take your thumb off and you could have a good bridge with your index finger there. So when they come together, it's like you're pinching your middle finger right here. So watch this. I'm going to squeeze right here, and there's about the size of the hole that you want for your bridge. There's the loop. I don't like to have space in here at all, actually. So try to figure out how to make it nice and snug, but not too tight. You don't want to have it so tight that you can't go through. So that's why, a lot of people like to have the glove or talcum powder in their hands, so it's not too tight. Okay, so we have a rail bridge shot. The cue ball is, anytime, for me I measured it, it's like between 6 and 14 inches off the rail. I'm going to use what we call the closed hand rail bridge. And it's really important here, what you want to do is put the cue down on the table first, on the rail. And then keep the cue on the rail. So first put the cue on top of the rail. And now you're just going to form your bridge on top of that. You're not going to come up under here and lift the cue at all. So start out with the cue on the rail. Put your middle finger and your thumb next to the cue. And then this finger curls on top of it like that. So I don't know if you can bend your index finger backwards like that. It's like you're doing a fingerprint. You want that really tight, really solid. So, and now you can hit it real low if you want, or you can drop your back hand and hit it as high as you need to for a follow shot. Or you can hit center ball. Basically whatever you want to do, you can do that by controlling your back hand. And the whole time the cue just stays on the rail. Meanwhile, you don't want any play at all from side to side. So you squeeze it just enough so it doesn't move. So that one's about 6 inches off the rail. Here's 14. Now that's just what I came up with for myself. Once it gets beyond that, I don't really like to do this off the rail. What I'll do is I'll bring my hand down right over here, my closed hand bridge. And I don't want it too close, so instead of putting my palm down here, I'm going to keep my palm up here and just drop my fingers in. And I'm going to stay solid by actually putting my palm on the table in this case. So you see how I can get a nice bridge here. This is a little too far for me. That's a nice distance here, and if I want I can get the stick right down by the rail or up a little bit higher like that. So once I'm in here, I don't like using the rail bridge inside of about 6 inches because I don't get much of a backswing. So I can actually do my closed hand bridge and pull back to here, control the height with my fingers. So now I have a nice backswing. I can pull all the way back to here again, as opposed to only right to here. And I'm real solid with my fingers in this case. Or I could have the same angle of the cue and use the open hand bridge either with my finger up or squeezing like that, which is actually really solid. Okay, may as well demonstrate one for you here. We'll put the cue down. Just like that. You see how this finger contained cue. So if I wanted to bend the cue even more, or if I was going to pull up more, the cue is going to bend because this finger is so solid right here. Right? Now if it just pops off, if I'm not that tight, that's what's going to happen. If I keep it tight, it's just real solid that way. And how I set up for that, I actually have this one ready in the air. I'll kind of hold the cue like that, and then I come down and just move my thumb out of the way as I'm coming down. So I don't actually do this and then put my hand on it. I'm all ready to go. And my feet are set, and I just come down into my stance. Land the bridge right on the table, just like that. And you don't want to be hanging over the side like that with your fingers kind of dangling over the edge because you're not very solid right there. Okay, now so you can see from another angle. Here's the rail bridge. Now here's a case where I'm on my thumb right here. I'm starting out with my thumb underneath my hand, and I'm actually just going to be resting on my thumb. And that's going to be in between, like I said, about 6 and 14 inches. Now the cue is still on the rail, just my fingers and my thumb are there. That's what I used to use primarily. Now mainly I'm going to have my hand on the table. And we'd have more table here if it were a different brand. Most tables have a wider, or at least most professional tables. A lot of home tables have these thin rails here. So but it's really, really solid to put your hand there and your fingers. So one thing I like about this view is I want you to see not to hang your fingers off over the edge so much, unless you really want to. Then go ahead and grab on. Some players like doing that to grab. You'll feel it's pretty solid, but I'd say keep your fingers up on top of the rail and your hand, because you're going to feel that pressure down. Here you're losing some stability in your fingers, and I can't stress enough how important that is, having stability. So with this one, it looks about like that. Once the cue ball starts coming out here a little bit more, then I can start to get my whole hand on the table. As far as the close hand bridge, you can actually have your palm off the table even just a little bit. Even if you want to do a draw shot, you can have your palm off the table, just your fingers on the edge, and that's real nice if you can stay solid with that, because it really connects your arm from your shoulder all the way down to the tips of your fingers. Just depends on what you're comfortable with. There's a few other variations on the close hand bridge. You can have these fingers together, right, and that's really solid right in here. See how nice that is? Nice and solid. That's with that finger out. This one, for some reason, when you put that finger under here, this becomes really solid also, and you can adjust the height right there. Okay, now I'm going to show you a rail bridge that works good for the break, and it also works good for shots of different angles off the rail like this. So it kind of has the same idea as the rail bridge, where you put the cue stick on the rail. For the break, first I'll find my distance by holding the cue ball the same way, and when it hits my hand, that's my distance. Then I can always make adjustments from there. So anyway, we have our cue ball there, and now the cue is going to be on the rail, again by these fingers right here, and I'm locking this finger in real tight. So on the break especially, I'm going to put a lot of weight into the back of my hand, way back here in my palm. I'm actually going to bend my elbow more, but see, this is going to be real solid right here. Okay, so that was a break bridge. Here we have a similar angled shot. See the bridge, how I land right into that bridge? Okay, and it stayed solid. I'll show you from the other side. Okay, so from the other side, whether it's a break or just you're making a shot, here's what it's going to look like. I see how I have these two fingers came down that way. They're on the table, nice and solid. My hand's on the rail. These two fingers are down there. And then these fingers are solid up here. And it doesn't move the whole time. So you can do that for the break shot as well. Okay, here's an interesting situation that comes up. The rail, to do the normal rail bridge like this, I'm just too far from the cue ball. I don't feel comfortable doing that. And then this feels too close, so you gotta be creative in these spots. This is kind of one of those funny spots. Even that feels a little weird. So you might have to do something like this, where you hook that finger. See that? So I'm not way back here. But you might want to do that, and then just don't take a very long backswing. So let's see, if the ball's out here a little more. Now I'm out there a little more comfortable with my finger. So these, sometimes you might want to hook around, so you have a shot like this. Well, that's a lot easier in this case, see that? So you can see how you're going to have to adapt to the situation, especially around the rails. Okay, now I'm going to show you a great bridge for breaking from the table, from the bed of the table, which is great for playing 8-ball or 10-ball, which is real popular these days. So we have a rack of 8 ball, and what I want to do is put my weight onto this side of my hand, the back of my hand over here, and these 2 fingers including my pinky. So I'm going to roll my hand over that way this time and bend my elbow more than usual and shoot slightly down onto the ball, although I don't want to shoot down too much because I don't want to miss. I don't want to jump the ball too much. So when you break, keep your weight in your hand when you pull back, and as you go forward, push that weight up into the hand over here. See how it's on this side of my hand? I was talking earlier about the bridge, the close hand bridge, where you put both sides of the heel of your hand on the table, and how I think it's more solid. And it is a great playing bridge. However, for breaking from the bed of the table, this is a great bridge, and you can play with it too if you really like it. But you don't want to get too high unnecessarily with most of your shots. Okay, now I'll show you from this angle, coming up on this side of my hand with my pinky and these 2 fingers, and really putting a lot of weight into my hand and keeping the weight there as I go forward. There we go. Okay, now the break is one of the only times where I look at the cue ball when I strike it. And part of the reason is because I'm actually transferring my weight forward, and it helps me get a more balanced and solid hit on the cue ball if I'm actually looking at the cue ball. It's kind of like golf. You're supposed to look at the ball as you're coming through, and you are transferring your weight. So it's good to be looking at what you're hitting. So in pool, that's what I'm going to do, especially from this bed of the table break. I'm going to line up coming down like this, make sure that I'm lined up perfectly, and then when I'm ready to hit the cue ball, keep my eyes on it, pull back, and then follow through. Give that a shot, and I think you'll like how solid you hit the ball. Alright, I have a helpful tip for you for bridging off the rail when the cue ball is frozen to the rail. You don't want to necessarily have a stroke that's perfectly level to the table, because your tip might glance off the cue ball. You don't have much cue ball to hit anyway. And if you're totally level, or even shooting up into the cue ball, there's a good chance you're going to miscue. So it's okay to shoot slightly down into this cue ball actually to get a little bit of a solid hit. You just don't want to come up too much to where you're going to masse it unless you really have to elevate because you want to masse or you want to stop the cue ball. So a tip I have for you is to put pressure down on your wrist right here. The front part of your hand, press down on the cue, and then with your ring finger back here pull up, and that'll put pressure down on the cue. So when you go through the cue ball, the cue wants to stay going down instead of popping up for a miscue. So it'll look like this. You might not even be able to see it, but putting pressure down in the front of my cue, and my cue was nice and solid all the way through that cue ball. Okay, now some of you probably want to learn how to use the mechanical bridge. It's also called the rake or the granny or the crutch. And when you can't reach the shot, that's when you pull this baby out. And basically you want it to be solid like your bridge hand. So what you do is you hold it solid if you're right-handed with your left hand out here. You want to get control of it and stand on the stroking line, so the cue is going to be directly out in front of you on the stroking line. And then you hold it off to the side like this and press down on the table. Press it down on the table. Back here you can hold it with your thumb and your front 2 fingers, hold the cue, or you can put all 4 fingers on top. But basically you're going to be looking down the stroking line, and you hold your elbow out here like this. So you just try to give it a straight stroke as possible. And be careful not to do that. So if you want, you can do kind of like a circular motion. Kind of like that. So basically you can just shoot a few racks until you get the hang of it. And it'll come in handy for sure. But I would also recommend learning how to play opposite-handed. That'll come in handy too. I think you'll get a lot more touch. But you know, it's a necessary evil to bridge. You're going to want to use it. So just practice a few racks, or even practice for a whole day with the bridge. Okay, now I'm just going to go through some bridges so you get a closer look. Here's my closed hand bridge. See how tight the thumb is, and then this finger is really tight. Both sides of the heel of my hand are on the table. My fingers are all down real tight. If I wanted, I could have my hand slightly off or elevated. This could be looped like that from this angle. Could have that finger up, could have that finger underneath over here. From over here it looks like this. Here would be the elevated version. Alright, now here's open hand bridge. The one I like is with the thumb down like that. So you can change your elevation also. And then with your backhand moving up and down, you can pretty much hit the cue ball wherever you want as well. So you have total versatility with your bridge hand and creating ideal contact for the cue ball. Alright, so I hope that helps. Okay, so here's my closed hand bridge. Now if you want, you could come over like this to where you're on the outside of your hand back here, and then really solid on those fingers and solid up here on your pinky. So if that's more comfortable. But I would try getting that down. You can kind of see how nice and solid it is, and you'll actually feel a difference in your arm and the whole solidity of your stance when you do that, when you bring the entire back side of your hand down onto the table. This one is great because your fingers are totally connected, and that'll tend to make sure that your entire arm is connected as well. You'll feel that.